I'm Paul Perello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. For decades, the Philadelphia Zoo has played a monumental role in educating the public about exotic animals, promoting and participating in worldwide conservation efforts for endangered wildlife, and providing exceptional recreational opportunities for families. Located at 34th and Girard in West Philadelphia, Philadelphia Zoo has the distinction of being America's first zoo. In 2006, the Philadelphia Zoo announced that it was abandoning plans to develop a new elephant habitat because costs for the project were rising by the day. They were skyrocketing, and pressure was mounting to address the concerns of some of the conditions of the current pachyderms at the zoo. Zoo officials announced they would send the 4 elephants to other zoos that were better suited to care for the elephants. Much of the public awareness campaign that we saw unfold here in the Philadelphia area, to raise the consciousness of what the zoo animals, the pachyderms in particular, were going through, was due in part to the efforts of Friends of Philly Zoo Elephants and Marianne Bessie. Marianne joins us to discuss her work and talk about the very latest, what's going on with the Philadelphia Zoo Elephants. Marianne, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on the show, Paul.
I think I stand correct in saying that much of what we have learned about the conditions at the Philadelphia Zoo when it comes to the pachyderms there was the direct result of the work of your organization.
I agree. I think that we did a huge part in raising the public awareness of this issue. A lot of people were not aware of the suffering that elephants go through and the trend in the United States right now, which is to improve the elephant exhibits or close exhibits. Mm-hmm. And we had learned of the Philadelphia Zoo's plans to expand to 2.5 acres at a cost of around $22 million. And we had done research and we knew that that was inadequate, 2.5 acres. They were going to add 3 or 4 more elephants and try to breed. So we launched our campaign at that time. It was around 2005.
Mm-hmm. And so the skyrocketing cost can sort of put the lid, I guess, on plans by the zoo to sort of move forward with that expansion. And then all of a sudden they had these 4 zoo elephants that they needed to do something with, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But how did you first learn about, I guess some would say, the deplorable conditions that these 4 elephants were sort of living in?
Well, I found out, I was involved with elephants that were at the Detroit Zoo. I had learned about these 2 elephants called Winky and Wanda, where the Detroit Zoo director, Ron Kagan, had decided to make the compassionate decision and send them to a sanctuary in California. And I learned, because I was working on other animal issues, I learned that the American Zoo and Aquarium Association was threatening to pull the accreditation of the Detroit Zoo because he was making that decision to send them to a sanctuary, not to another zoo. So I got involved with that campaign long distance, mm-hmm. and I thought, what's going on with the Philadelphia Zoo elephants? I'd never been to the zoo. I didn't know anything about the elephants here, but I decided to look into it, and I found out that there were 4 living on a 1/4 acre, which was even worse than the Detroit Zoo's current exhibit of 1 acre that they thought was inadequate. Sure. So I thought, I should do something about these elephants here. And then I started visiting them. I noticed that they looked like they were having some medical problems. It just snowballed from there.
Mm-hmm. There are 4 elephants that are at the zoo. 3 are African elephants and 1 Asian elephant at the Philadelphia Zoo?
That's right. Delari is the Asian elephant. She's about 42 years old. And then there's 3 African elephants. There's 1 older African elephant named Petal. She's about 50, 51. And then there's 2 younger ones, Callie and Bet, which are 23 and 24. Callie and Bet used to come to the zoo to give elephant rides. And then in about 2004, they moved in permanently. So at that point, they had 4 elephants in a tiny little exhibit. Really, that wasn't satisfactory for 1 elephant, let alone 4. And sure enough, problems occurred, and Bet actually attacked Delari and gored her near her eye, causing her to lose some sight in that eye and get infected and so on. And from that point on, that happened in July of 2005. And they were kept separated from that point on.
And I think that's where some of the public consciousness started to begin, when the 1 elephant suffered the eye injury. And I think people that went to the zoo looking for the elephants would be surprised to learn that the elephants weren't being taken out of their pens, if you will. They weren't being put out on display, and people wanted to know where the elephants were. But it was because of this situation between these two elephants that sort of kept the elephants away from the public.
Well, I think at first no one really knew because they still had the 3 African elephants out. So unless you really went to the zoo a lot and you knew how many elephants were there. Now remember, there's 1,600 animals approximately at the Philadelphia Zoo. I don't know how many patrons are really up to speed on how many elephants live there before all this happened.
Sure.
I think now people know, or how many rhinos or how many tigers or whatever. So I don't really think people were aware of a missing elephant. Like we brought that awareness. The zoo did not make an announcement. We actually took out ads in the newspaper, missing ads, and offered a $500 reward for the first person who would see Dilawri. We put up posters around town saying missing elephant because we didn't know what happened to her. And then eventually it came out after we filed a complaint with the USDA, and People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals also filed a complaint. And then at that point in October, the zoo came public with what happened with Dilawri.
And which brings me to my next question is that in trying to reach out to zoo officials to find out what was going on with Dilawri, they weren't very forthcoming with that information?
Well, we got conflicting information. We would go to the zoo and we would ask the zoo employees, maybe a docent or something. We would be told that she was just inside. We were told that she had like a scratch near her eye and it was healing, but there was nothing that she had gotten into this serious of a fight and that she was really having to be separated. It was just that her continued absence, day after day, we never saw her. We'd only see the 3 Africans out. We did call the zoo, and we did get conflicting information on what actually happened and when she would be back out, and so on.
You actually then take this campaign not only for the missing elephant posters that you sort of put around town, but you actually take the campaign to the people. Kiddingly, before we started taping, I mentioned that it was not uncommon to see someone dressed in an elephant costume sitting in city council chambers to sort of raise the awareness, if not of the public, at least of the city lawmakers, that there was something that they needed to address when it came to bigger issues at the Philadelphia Zoo. So it was a great way to sort of generate the public interest in the campaign. And then you launch a petition drive, and you actually brought the pile of,
Right.
7,000 signatures here?
Right. This is over 7,000 signatures. These are just the signatures that we got around town. There's also an online petition where we have close to 1,000 signatures. But this was just part of our outreach campaign where we would go out to different places in the area. We would go to outside the zoo, we would go to the gallery, we went sometimes SEPTA train station, in front of the Art Museum, in front of the Franklin Institute, the Academy of Natural Sciences, all over the place. Parades, we would go to a parade, and we would just educate people, and this petition is in support of sending all 4 elephants to a sanctuary and closing the elephant exhibit. So this isn't just about Dilawri, this was about the whole issue. And we found overwhelming public support once people were educated on this issue for closing down the exhibit and sending the elephants away.
Let's talk a little bit about why close down the exhibit, because people would say, one of the things that they would like to see when they go to the zoo are the lions and tigers and bears and the elephants. And the elephants have always been sort of like a centerpiece attraction for people that go to the zoo. But when you sort of look behind the scenes of what the public sees, they are being held in a very small area, and some would say in really deplorable conditions.
And that was part of the education. People would go to the zoo and they would see the elephants out there and they would think, oh, that doesn't look too bad. I mean, because they're out in this yard, and they don't really think about where the elephants go at night, which is inside of a cement barn. It's the size of 6 parking spaces, and 4 elephants, which weigh between like 8,000 and 9,000 pounds, are crammed into that space. And they're chained some of the time, probably most of the time they're inside the barn just because of the configuration of the barn. So part of our awareness campaign was to educate people on that is where the elephants are spending 12 to 15 hours a day, if not more, because when the zoo closes, that's where they go. And even beyond that, just the yard itself is just a 1/4 acre, which is about the size of maybe a suburban backyard. And these are the world's largest land mammals. They're walking constantly in the wild. They walk for about 18 to 20 hours a day. They only sleep for about 4 hours a day, and they're engineered to move. So the fact that they're crammed into this 1/4 acre limits them from expressing their most basic need for the walking. And it's not only psychological, it's physical. The number one cause of death of a captive elephant in zoos is foot and joint related problems. And they're dying at about half their natural lifespan, and they're being euthanized because of that.
So in order for them to live fully productive lives, they need to move, and they're not getting the at least minimum daily allowance of movement either out in the exhibit area and definitely not behind the scenes in this barn where they're being held then.
Exactly, because in the wild they're roaming up to 30 miles a day, and there's 640 acres in just 1 mile, and the Philadelphia Zoo is a 1/4 acre, and the largest United States zoo exhibit for elephants is less than 8 acres. So really that's inadequate for any elephant in any zoo right now. The sanctuaries that have opened up for elephants have like hundreds of acres. Like the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee, where Dilawri is going, has 2,700 acres for I think a total of 19 elephants that are living there right now.
But I guess the issues confronting Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Zoo, I'm guessing, are not uncommon to other inner city zoos. I mean, you have New York Zoo, you mentioned Detroit. So you would think that this is not something new, although for us here in Philadelphia, hearing much of what you're talking about, sort of an eye-opening experience for us, because we don't sort of think of, I guess when you go out to the zoo and you would see them out in the exhibit area, you're just thinking they're there all the time, and you're not thinking about where they're being held at night. But Philadelphia can't be the only inner city zoo that is confronting situations like this.
Oh, absolutely not. It's definitely a trend. The Bronx Zoo announced that it would be closing its exhibit after its elephants died. The Detroit Zoo, and then there's zoos that never had elephants. There's a total of, I think, 270 zoos in the United States. There's only about 70 that have elephants. So a lot of zoos just don't even have elephants. It does seem like an attraction that, it's not a real zoo without elephants. I hear that a lot.
Sure.
But it's really not, people expect to see elephants, but they also expect that they're being well taken care of. Like that's something that goes hand in hand. And they're not in zoos. And that's what's really people are becoming aware of. And it's only been in the last 10 or 20 years that the awareness level and even the knowledge level has been there. So it's really a steep learning curve for everyone, not just the public, but the zoos themselves.
We're talking with Marianne Bessie, whose group, her group Friends of Philly Zoo Elephants, very much responsible for raising the public awareness of what is going on with the elephants at the Philadelphia Zoo. 4 elephants there are scheduled to move out. 3 of them were supposed to go to the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore, and it looked like everything was moving forward with those plans. The 4th one was going to go to a sanctuary in Tennessee. Now, Dilawri is still scheduled to go to that sanctuary in Tennessee, correct?
That's correct, sometime this month. The plan is, I believe, for the director of the sanctuary to come and visit her, get final vet clearances, and then bring the trailer up, get her acclimated to the trailer, make sure she's comfortable with that, and then take a 2 to 3 drive down to where she'll be in elephant heaven when she gets there.
Yeah, kiddingly, I said, knowing nothing about moving elephants, you would think, the public would think that this large U-Haul truck pulls up at the back gate of the zoo, they throw down the hatch in the back, and the elephant just walks onto the back, and then you just you take off and go down the Schuylkill Expressway to I-95 down to Baltimore. But it's not that simple. The elephant actually needs to get acclimated with walking on to the trailer and being comfortable with the trailer.
Absolutely, and especially with an elephant like Dilawri, who hasn't traveled for quite a few years. She's been at the zoo for her whole life, for over 40 years. She hasn't left that place, so this will be quite a change for her. And elephants traveling, there's been some problems recently. There was an elephant coming from the Chicago Zoo named Wanky, who was being transported to the a zoo in Utah, and she actually collapsed en route, and the truck kept going. She suffered some major injuries and actually died when she reached her destination. So it is a serious undertaking that requires some preparation.
The other 3 were scheduled to go to the Baltimore Zoo, is what we were talking about. But the Baltimore Zoo has problems now with their expansion plans. So now we have Dilawri going to Tennessee, but now these three other elephants will remain in Philadelphia because Philadelphia really doesn't have a backup plan, if you will, as to where to send these other three now that they're not going to the Baltimore Zoo.
That's right. But there is a place that would take them. There's a sanctuary in California called the Performing Animal Welfare Society Sanctuary, and that's the sanctuary where the elephants from Detroit were placed. There's an elephant from the Los Angeles Zoo that's going there. The San Francisco Zoo elephants went there. So it's really, it's a place that zoos have chosen to send their elephants, and they have agreed to take all three of the Philly, I guess the Philly three Africans, Cal, Bet, and Petal. But the Philadelphia Zoo is saying that they want to keep the elephants put them in another zoo, and isn't really looking at this sanctuary. So we're going to continue to try to raise public awareness of this. We've been explaining to people the situation, and we've gotten a lot of public support on supporting sending them to this California sanctuary and not another zoo.
But it's important to keep these three elephants together because you might have one sanctuary that says, well, we can take one or two, but we don't have room for three, or we can take one, and then another one would say, well, we'll take the other. But it's important because these three elephants have sort of cohabitated, if you will, for all these years together. It's important to keep the three of them together?
Yes. Well, that's one thing that's really sad about elephants in zoos is they're really missing out on the social aspect, because in the wild they spend their entire lives with their families, and it's a very extended matriarchal herd. So the mothers, the aunts, sisters, spend their whole entire lives together, and the calves, the bulls usually stay in the herd till age about 15, till like adolescence, and they kind of form their own bachelor herds. But these three elephants, the African elephants, have formed a bond living together for the last few years, and it would be very hard on them to split them up now. They do seem, we've seen them really interact, do trunk touching and things like that, which is a sign of affection among elephants. So the hope would be that they could stay together.
What is the typical life expectancy for an elephant in the wild, if you will, compared to an elephant that is in a sanctuary or at a zoo?
Well, the life expectancy is a number that's a little misleading because elephants are so severely under pressure in their native ranges. In Africa, they're being poached still for their ivory. There's habitat destruction. In Asia, they're diminishing habitat. So they're being killed before they reach their natural lifespan. Wow. So their life expectancy in zoos and in the wild is probably about the same, but their lifespan, if they were allowed to live out their natural lifespan, would be about 70. And in protected ranges, there's a project that has been going on in Kenya for many years. It's the Amboseli National Park project, where they've been studying wild elephants. There's an elephant there named Echo who has given birth at age 60.
Wow.
So if they're allowed and they're not poached and they're not killed for whatever reason, they live to be like 60 or 70, or even sometimes older, even like 80. So their lifespan is one thing, their life expectancy is something different. In zoos, they're dying at about between age 35 and 40. And their number one cause of death, as I mentioned earlier, is foot and joint related problems, and that's never found in the wild.
Marianne, some people would say that, well, at least if they're living in a zoo, and I'm sure you've heard this argument before, is that at least they're being protected from the poachers. They're being protected from those people who are out to do them harm in some of the other continents, of the world. So at least they have a place where, they're going to get fed and they're going to be cared for on a regular basis, as opposed to being in the wild where their life expectancy is being severely impacted by the poachers and the people, the hunters that are out there to kill them.
Well, if you're looking at strictly just keeping an animal alive and not looking at quality of life, that's true. But that would be like saying there's this massive genocide going on in Darfur. Let's bring the people here and put them in prison. They'll live longer. We have room in our jails. I'm sure we don't, but that would be a similar argument. I mean, they're being so, massively threatened in their native ranges, but is it the answer to bring them here and to live a life of suffering, which they really are? It's not an elephant's life in the current exhibits they have.
How do you move an 8,000 8-pound elephant. You brought something along with you.
Oh, sure.
Because I think this really demonstrates to people that you can't communicate with an elephant and say, okay, it's time to move now, or follow me onto the truck. This is a typical tool that is used by an elephant handler?
Well, this is, there's 3 different kinds of management of elephants. Free contact and protected contact are the most common. This is for the free contact method, where it's based on domination of the elephant and forcing the elephant to do things with negative reinforcement with this bull hook. And it is used at about 50% of the zoos here in the United States. But there's also another method of management called protected contact, where it is based on positive reinforcement, and there's always a barrier between the keeper and the elephant, so there's no risk to the keeper. And that is a method of management that's being used at the sanctuaries and also at zoos like the North Carolina Zoo and the Oakland Zoo. But this particular bull hook is used, as I said, 50% of the zoos here in the United States and by circus trainers. And they use the point, as you can see, it's a sharp point, and it's used to inflict pain on sensitive areas of the elephant, usually like behind the ear or behind the knee joint. And it's really a horrendous thing for the elephant. These are really sensitive creatures. Their skin, it looks really tough and rugged, but they can feel a fly land. They're subject to sunburn. That's why they're always putting mud on themselves. So to use this on the elephant is really tragic.
Your campaign has been very successful in raising the public consciousness, public awareness of what these elephants have been going through. It has prompted the Philadelphia Zoo to make the decision that they need to move to a better environment, if you will. You constantly are watching to make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing and making sure that this whole grand plan now actually moves forward. Are you happy, content with this campaign that you started a few years ago and where it is now and the next step that's going to happen?
Well, I think the one missing thing in our campaign is that we really wanted to get more education of how to help elephants in the wild, conservation of elephants in their native ranges. That's something that zoos are spending millions of dollars to keep a handful of elephants here in captivity, when just that same amount of money, or even a fraction of it, could go to help these native range countries. For example, the entire budget for the Kenya Wildlife Park is like less than $1 million. And zoos are planning to spend like $150 million to expand their exhibits and keep elephants in the next few years. So it's just to us, that's like a real tragedy, and we see that continuing, and we really want to work to change that. The bigger picture type thing, like this local campaign, locally with the Philadelphia Zoo elephants, we're delighted that the Philadelphia Zoo made the right decision to close the exhibit, and we hope that they never revisit it and want to build an exhibit, because
Sure.
they just, with the 42-acre zoo, this northern climate, they just don't have the capacity to keep elephants in a humane way and meet their needs. But we do wish that there could be more education on what to do to help elephants in the wild, because zoos claim that that's their mission. But if it is, it's really failing, because elephants have never been more threatened. In just the last decade, their numbers are steadily decreasing, especially in Asia.
As I mentioned at the outset of the show, that and right from the mission statement of the Philadelphia Zoo, they themselves have said that they have played a role in educating the public about exotic animals, promoting and participating in worldwide conservation efforts for endangered wildlife, and providing exceptional recreational opportunities for families. And perhaps one of those two statements hold true, in that people go to the Philadelphia Zoo for a great recreational opportunity, but we're not aware, and perhaps this is on the part of the Philadelphia Zoo, that they are not promoting or participating enough in sort of helping with worldwide conservation. It would hope not only the Philadelphia Zoo, but some of these other zoos around the country, that if they're budgeting $22 million for an expansion, that they would even take a small fraction of that money, if they're abandoning plans to build a new elephant habitat at their zoo, and funnel some of that money to some of the conservation efforts around the world. You would hope that would be the
Right,
case.
and I do think there is some of that. There is, I don't want to give a false impression
Sure.
that they don't do anything for conservation, because zoos do, but most of the time the conservation, so-called conservation, is something like research or things that will help in the long run the captive elephant, like looking at diseases or something like that. So they call it conservation, but it's really not protecting the habitat in the native countries. That is what needs to be done, and that's what's not being done right now, at least not in the way it should be.
In the few minutes that we have left, while the elephants have gotten all of the attention over the past few years, are there any other scenarios or situations that are playing out at the zoo right now that you feel need to be addressed, and whether it's your organization or someone else out there who may be aware of a situation at the zoo that needs to be addressed? Are you aware of anything else that's going on at the zoo right now?
I think not at a micro level, not really aware of anything, but I think at a larger level, there is a new zoo director there who might have some fresh ideas, but just to revisit the whole idea of keeping elephants or animals on display as a way for people to learn about them. Is that really what we need to do, is to educate people? You think about like dinosaurs. I mean, kids never see a dinosaur, an actual dinosaur, but yet they're fascinated by them and know a lot about them. I mean, just the whole idea of a zoo, do we really need that to educate kids?
But the other thing too is that while everything today with tourism is interactive, you still need the barrier between the human world and the animal world. I mean, you can sort of educate and inform the public as much as you possibly can, but there still is there needs to be that line between this side of the world where we humans live and the other side of the fence, if you will, where the animals, coexist with us, but there's always that line between us.
Well, not really sure what you mean by the line.
Yeah, I mean, the tendency is to think that, in order to learn more about, wildlife and conservation efforts, that you sort of, have to coexist without boundaries. I mean, you're not going to be able to step over the fence and walk out on the Serengeti, if you will, at any zoo and sort of, coexist with the giraffes in order to really understand that. And people may not necessarily have the money or the budget to go to Kenya and sort of get up close and personal with, with elephants. So I guess there has to be a happy medium between, what it is that we can do and sort of crossing that line into their world where we could be putting ourselves in danger.
Right, and that's I'm not advocating that we go to Africa and start infringing on their territory there. Sure. But it's just that with technology today, there's so many live cameras that you can watch to see animals in their native habitat. And I did have the fortune to go to Africa, and I saw every possible animal you could imagine up close and personal. But I learned a lot more about animals by watching them on these live cams, by watching mothers and babies interacting and things like that. It was a great experience to go there, but that's not really what has been the most fascinating thing to me and what has educated me the most.
I want to give the website out for people who would like more information. They can go to your website, which is helpphillyzooelephants.com. They could go there, they could find out the very latest what's going on with the Philadelphia Zoo elephants and many of the other things that you're involved in, correct?
Right, that's our website for that particular issue. We also do things with the circus elephants, and our website for that is circusedu.com.
Okay, and again, this has been a long, drawn-out campaign, but one that has been very eye-opening for all of us in the Philadelphia area. So we thank you for all of your efforts. You should be applauded for what you have done, and again, it's all for the benefit of the elephants, and we'll continue to watch the story develop, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul.
We thank Mary Ann Bessie for being with us here talking about the 4 elephants from the Philadelphia Zoo. And again, if you would like more information, just log on to the website, which is helpphillyzooelephants.com. For the Philly Factor, I'm Paul Perello. Thanks so much for being with us.